we look at graphs of inequalities. So given the inequality S is less than or equal to 2c plus 460, we want to decide if c comma s 3 comma 400 is going to create a true or false statement. We do that by plugging them in. When I plug these in, the value for s is 400. So I get 400 is less than or equal to 2 times the value for c, which is 3, plus 460. From there, I end up simplifying the right side to give me 466. So is 400 less than or equal to 466? Yes, that means it's a true statement. Now that means that if I were to graph this line right here, s is less than or equal to 2c plus 460, it would look like this. Because the point at 3 comma 400, which is right here, gave us a true statement, that means that that side should get shaded. So we would shade in this region. And that's one way to determine where to shade. The other thing we can do is just realize that this says s is less than or equal to. The values that are less than or equal to this line would be the values that are below the line. So either way, we would shade that region. And any point in this shaded region would be considered a solution to the inequality. So there are a lot of different options for this. And that solution is called a half plane. When we move on to this next problem, what we're looking at here is we have the graph of this inequality. Now again, we can think about where the shading should happen without really testing this point, but we are going to test this point in a second here. Now, without testing the point, this says f is less than or equal to. So what I would want to do is shade everywhere less than this line, which is going to put us down here in this region. Now, if I do so by checking this point, 2 comma 500, 2 comma 500 is the point right here. So as I plug this in, since I am already expecting that this side is going to get shaded, I do not think that 2 comma 500 is going to give me a true statement, and we're going to check that right now. So as I plug this in, I end up getting 500 is less than or equal to negative 551.7 times 2 plus 881.5. Now we're not using a calculator here. So we know that this is going to be around negative 1100. And when we add that to 881.5, it is going to produce a negative number. So we don't need to know exactly what that negative number is to know that 500 is not going to be less than or equal to a negative number here. So therefore, 2 comma 500 is false. That means that the side that contains this point should not be the side that's shaded. And again, that's why we would want to shade this side of the line. So this example is not solved for either of the variables at this point. Now we could start by solving this for s, because s is kind of like our y value in this problem. So we could solve that for that value and determine if it was going to get shaded above or below. But since we don't have that set up yet, let's go ahead and test the point negative 2 comma 4. So if I'm testing the point negative 2 comma 4 here, if it is true, I'm going to shade this side. If it is false, I'm going to shade the opposite side. So as we plug this in, we see that we get 700 times negative 2 plus 600 times 4 is greater than 3,300. That's going to give me negative 1,400 plus 2,400, which is 1,000, is greater than 3,300. That's a false statement. So because that's false, this side should not be shaded, and therefore we shade the other region. Also in this problem, we do have a dotted line because this one doesn't have greater than or equal to, it's just greater than. So in example 1, we see we have g is greater than or equal to 7. So one thing right away that we want to look at is kind of do a comparison of these lines and see what's the same and what's different. Now they all look like they're in the same position where g would be equal to 7. So one thing we can pay attention to is the type of inequality. This says greater than or equal to. With the equal sign, it means that this should be a solid line. And that's going to tell me that it cannot be A or B. The other thing we know is that since it's greater than, the shading should happen above the line. So between option C and D, it would have to be D since that one has the shading above the line. For number 2, C is less than or equal to 90. Here, when I compare all of these different graphs, I can see that they're all solid lines, so I'm not going to be able to eliminate anything there. The next thing I need to consider is, should it be a horizontal line or should it be a vertical line? And this can be a little bit tricky. What we want to consider here, we're used to seeing these graphs in terms of X and Y most of the time, but obviously in this case, it's in terms of C and S. Now the C is our input values. These are our domain values that we're used to thinking of as being X. The S in this case would represent our Y values. So in this case, we are kind of looking at X is less than or equal to 90. It is C is less than or equal to 90, so we need to go where C is 90. That means that our line should be vertical, passing through 90. So it cannot be A and it cannot be B. It's got to either be C or D. Now from here, this says that C is less than or equal to 90. So since it's values that are smaller than or equal to 90, it does have to be shaded on the left side, not on the right side. For this example, once again, we want to think about which one we're solving for. Again, here, we want to solve for D in this case because D is what we're using for our output values. It's going to represent this line right here. So when I go to solve for D here, I subtract B, and I've got D is less than or equal to negative B plus 20. Now from there, I see that this is a negative slope. So if I look at the 4 different options here, 2 of them are negative slopes and 2 of them are positive slopes. So I will be able to eliminate options C and D right away. The next thing that I might notice is the inequality. It says less than or equal to. Less than means that I should be shading below the line. So between the 2 options that are left, it would have to be B. Again, we could also do this by testing a point. Maybe I would test 0, 0 here. I would get 0 is less than or equal to 0 plus 20. Then it becomes 0 is less than or equal to 20, which is a true statement. So that means that this side should get shaded. In example 4, once again, we decide what to solve for. We would have to solve for U in this case. So I would subtract the G, and I could divide by 0.5, but I also want to keep in mind that 0.5 is really 1/2. So I might be better off multiplying by 2. Now that's going to cancel the 0.5 or the 1/2 here, and I end up getting negative 2G plus 16 on the right side here. From here, I'm looking at a negative slope, and all 4 of these options are negative slopes, so I can't necessarily get rid of anything at this point. But then the 16 is the horizontal intercept. So here I'm looking at the horizontal intercept here is positive 8, so that's going to be out. For B, it's also at 8, so that's out. For C, it does look like it's going to be around 16, and so does D. So between these 2, I want to look at what's different, and that's going to be the shading. Since this one says less than or equal to, again, the shading should be below the line, and that's why this one is going to have to be C. For number 5, again, we want to make sure that we're solving for the correct variable here. So again, this T is representing this axis right here. So that is the correct one that we're solved for here. Now from here, I see that this says greater than or equal to. So one thing I'm looking at is it should be shaded above the line. So that's going to tell me that A would work, B would not work, C would not work, and D would potentially work. From there, my slope is going to be 1/2. So I want to look to see which of these graphs looks like it goes up 1 and over 2 units. This one looks like it goes up 2 to go over 4, which would reduce to 1/2. So that does appear to be the correct slope. Whereas over here, it looks like we are going up 8 units to go over 4. So this slope right here would be 2. In number 6, again, when we think about what we're solving for here, we would have to solve for P because, again, it represents this axis. So when I solve for P here, I end up getting 2P. I subtract the 3M over, giving me 2P is greater than or equal to negative 3M plus 30. I'll divide the whole thing through by 2. That gives me P is greater than or equal to negative 3/2 M plus 15. From there, I'm looking at the fact that this is a greater than or equal to symbol, which means the shading should be above. So A would be an option, B is out, C is also out, and D is an option. From there, I'm again looking at what is going to be the same and different about these. Obviously, these slopes look a little different, but also their intercepts look different. So with an intercept of 15, I'm looking to see which one looks like it potentially crosses at 15. D does not look like it crosses at 15. It looks like maybe it crosses around 10. But A does look like it's crossing somewhere around 15, and it does look like it has the appropriate slope of -3/2, so A is our answer. On number 7, here we're going to solve for U because again it's representing this axis, and so I subtract 18 on each side. We then divide by 3. I get U is greater than or equal to -6G plus 20. Again, I look at greater than or equal to. That tells me the shading should be above the line. So B and C are out. From there, my slope is -6 and my intercept is 20. So between the options of A and D, the one that looks like it has a y-intercept of 20, or in this case, it's not a y-intercept, it's a u-intercept of 20, is going to be D. For number 8, this time we're solving for T. Again, this T is talking about these values right here. I could write the T here, or I could write the T up here at the top, showing me that it's this axis. This S is talking about these values right here. So I could write it here, or I could also write it right next to this line right here. So for this one, when I solve for T, I start by subtracting 5S. I get -3T is greater than or equal to -5S plus 15. From there, I divide everything through by -3. Since I'm dividing by a negative, I do have to flip the direction of the inequality, giving me -5 over -3 is +5/3 S. 15 divided by -3 is -5. So from here, I look at the fact that this is less than or equal to. So in each of these graphs, I look for less than or equal to. This one is greater than, that's shaded above, so A is out. B could be an option because it is shaded below the line. C could be an option because it's shaded below the line, and D would be out. From there, if I look at the fact that my horizontal intercept is negative, between options B and C, the one with the negative horizontal intercept is going to be B, so B would be the correct answer. Another thing to think about here is that this was a positive slope, so between options B and C, it had to be B since that has the positive slope. C had a negative slope. For number 9, we would be solving for Q, so I would subtract P on each side, giving me Q is less than -P plus 7. Again, here I look at the fact that this is less than. All of them are dotted lines, so I can't differentiate between that, but the graph should be shaded below the line. Here it's shaded above, so A is out. For B, it is shaded below, so that is an option. C is shaded below, so that's an option, and then D would be out because that one is shaded above. Between B and C, the next thing I'll look at is the fact that this is a negative slope. A negative slope is going to look like it does in B. C definitely has a positive slope, so C is out, and B would be our answer on number 9. So in this problem, I'll be solving for N because, again, N is talking about this axis right here. So when I solve for N, I start by adding 2M to each side. I get 3N is greater than 2M plus 12. From there, I'll divide everything through by 3, giving me N is greater than 2/3 M plus 4. From there, it's greater than, so it should be shaded above. So I will eliminate options B and D. Now, if I look at the slope, both of them appear to have positive slopes, so that might not be extremely helpful. But then I do see that the horizontal intercept has to be +4, and between options A and C, that would definitely have to be A.